welcome everyone to our session today, Risk-Based Monitoring and the Data Management Connection. Our learning objectives for the seminar this afternoon is to recognize the rationale regarding the risk-based monitoring. And as we know, the risk-based monitoring was an initiative that started a few years back, which now the risk-based approach to doing or performing clinical trials has been basically not modified, but let's say amplified by the ICH E6 revision 2. We'll illustrate the active role that CDM is expected to exhibit in this approach, list the potential CDM reports to assist in identification of data aberrations, and interpret the way forward for future CDM activities. So I would expect that you all are implementing risk-based approaches to your conduct in the data management division. If that's correct, give me a green check. And if not, give me a red X. All right. You are in process of having that implemented, and so we're going to speak about the risk associated with risk-based monitoring. And basically the definition of risk is someone or something that creates or suggests a hazard. And the risk must be defined and maintained across all stakeholders, and is to provide oversight and ensure that adequate protection of the rights, welfare, and the safety of human subjects. And that item, that second bullet, is usually that remit that is given by all of the agencies involved, is that human welfare, safety and welfare is priority. And then, of course, the quality and integrity of clinical trials data. And in the ICH E6 revision 2, the data quality was really the linchpin in many of the items that they proposed and put into that guideline. So quality, the definition of quality is the degree of excellence. Or it could be the system's property that must be built into an enterprise and cannot be achieved by oversight or monitoring alone. It needs to be maintained through the life cycle of the product and the evaluation of the risk to quality based on scientific knowledge and connected to the protection of patients. Does anyone in the group, are you familiar with the group called Transcelerate? Give me a green check if you've heard of them. Okay, and they basically were, let's say, the pioneers in identifying risks approaches, and they were the first to speak about risk-based monitoring, and then did a review of the successes and failures and how things worked after it had been implemented for some time. And so they have a significant training for the risk-based approach. So when we look at risk-based monitoring, and in my career, the last assignment I had, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you looked at it, was an oncology study that had been ongoing since 2013. And at that time, the sponsor of the study was not embracing that strategy or rationale. And so everything had to be 100% SDV. And of course, that was extraordinarily time consuming for the sites, and with oncology there were a lot of data points to be monitored, etc. But from the risk-based approach, that's the adaptive approach to clinical trial monitoring that directs the monitoring focus and activities to the evolving areas of the greatest need. And so we look at those areas in particular, probably your primary safety, efficacy, secondary endpoints, and those items that have been identified in the protocol that would be assessed for the risk, things that are not going to be analyzed by the final study report, don't necessarily need to be source document verified. If they're not going to be analyzed, we probably shouldn't even do query management on that type of information. But the FDA definition for risk-based is for monitoring activities that reflect a modern risk-based approach that focuses on critical study parameters and relies on a combination of monitoring activities to oversee a study effectively. So, for example, the guidance specifically encourages greater use of centralized monitoring methods where appropriate. This idea of the centralized monitoring or risk-based monitoring is really indicative of the use of an EDC platform. We can't do this same type of activity when we're working in paper trials. And I know you're probably thinking, my gosh, is there anybody out there that's still doing paper? And I can assure you that in my experience, there still are folks that are dealing with paper, but I would expect that you are EDC only.